would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. We're over the hump, folks. We're in the home stretch, the end of the week. I hope it's going well for everyone. The response to yesterday's show was interesting to say the least. We'll get into that in a second. If you'd like to get in contact with me, the best way to do that is through the website at therebelbroker.com. Click on Contacts in the menu, and you'll be able to send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have, and I welcome them, so please feel free to head on over and take advantage of that. While you're there, you can also get your name in a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. This is something we've been doing every month now for 5 months. Or 6. I can't remember now. But I've given out a lot of money. And we will be doing this again at the beginning of April, so we're in the home stretch of getting there as well. So head on over, click the big red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to Support the Show. Once you do that, you'll be presented with some dialogues that'll ask for your email address. Use the same email address both times you're asked. Answer the handful of demographic-style questions, and you're done. And your name will be entered into the drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. And who doesn't want a $50 Amazon gift card? I know I'd like one. Instead of giving them out, I'd love someone to give me one. In addition, if you'd like to get access to some exclusive content for members of the Rebel Underground, it's easy to join. Just text the word Rebel Broker, the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222. You'll know you're talking to the right folks by the response you get when you send that text out. Just follow the instructions and you will be all set to go. Right now, part of the exclusive content that's available only to Rebel Underground members is a video on step-by-step how to sort of drill down into from a larger area to a smaller area so that you can focus your investment strategies. The next video that we're going to be seeing that's going to bubble up for folks in the Rebel Underground is going to be a video that gets into much more detail. Once you have found that specific home, what tool do I use to analyze that? And, I happen to use a piece of software for this purpose. You don't necessarily have to. You could easily do it with a spreadsheet, but I want you to see what numbers are being tracked, projections that are made, those types of things. So you can see exactly how I figure out whether or not a property makes sense to pursue as an investment. Or flip side of that, if the price isn't right, given the list price, what is the right price to make it a purchase that makes sense in terms of an investment? Because luckily for us as investors, or at least if that's what you've got on your mind, you don't need to make emotional decisions about this. It's all math, and it makes it a little bit easier to figure out whether or not moving forward makes sense. Okay. With that out of the way, I wanted to thank all the folks who reached out to me after yesterday's show. What's really funny is no one reached out to me regarding the topic of yesterday's show, which was what we covered in the second half. What everyone wanted to talk about or thank me for was talking about real estate agents and the ones that have been pinging me after I put my home on Zillow as a make me move thing. I didn't want to go aggressive, right? I figured if something came along, great. I'm not really interested in listing the home officially and then having it become stale when I later raise the price after I'd done my remodeling. But I kind of wanted to leave the door ajar for a potential buyer who might come along where we could save money on commissions and all these other kinds of wonderful things. And if they came across it and saw that the price looked good, they liked the photos, their questions were answered, and they felt like the price that I had it out there for was reasonable, great. We could come to an agreement and we could get the home sold. I also would love to thank folks who reached out suggesting I don't replace my windows. I had 2 listeners say, Robert, what are you replacing your windows for? And both of you are absolutely right. In 99.9% of the cases, replacing your windows is typically not a bang for the buck thing. It might help. You might be able to make an argument. It helps you sell faster. In a normal case, that's less able to do. The only time you really want to replace windows is when they are broken, right? Broken windows are bad. It communicates all kinds of things beyond the window is broken. It communicates deferred maintenance and all these other kinds of things. So when windows are broken, that's one thing. But if you're just upgrading your windows from single to double pane, for instance, or dual pane, that might not be the exact smart thing to do. But as I've mentioned on previous shows, my house is a little bit different. I have a good 30 to 40 feet of the front of my house is nothing but windows for 2 stories. And I don't mean windows where there's, 3 feet of wall that meets a window. I mean from the absolute floor to the absolute ceiling is nothing but windows, which makes them very much a focal point when someone comes and looks at the house. And the idea of having nice, shiny new windows as that, because it's the level of curb appeal it would give to this particular house is pretty huge. That's one reason why I've been on the fence about that one. I am absolutely reevaluating because I'm with you. That advice I think is good, but I'm kind of on the fence on how I want to go with it. So anyway, what I've decided to do is focus on the other things, and if the big holdout is the windows, well, then maybe I need to be happy to credit the buyer with an amount of money that will help them move forward with upgrading the windows. Or maybe I do it myself and see what happens. But anyway, so appreciate all that feedback. But the feedback on the calling out how the real estate agents were reaching out to me was overwhelming, really. I had so many people that thought that was very valuable information. And I thought it would be worth mentioning it today since it wasn't really part of the description of yesterday's show or in the title of yesterday's show. I'd call today's show Real Estate Agents and the Lies They Tell, simply because that's one good example. But what really annoys me about the business of real estate, I almost feel like I should be drinking a cup of coffee and we should be sitting together having this chat, is how the casual lie is ingrained in real estate. To open that door, to establish rapport, and as I said, shows like that where I really come down on real estate agents, I tend to get 2 kinds of responses. When I first started this show in 2007, I was all about just punching real estate agents in the face, whether it was about relisting, which was much easier to do when I first started the show. It was where you would simply relist the home in the MLS to try to disconnect it from an existing listing where maybe it had gotten stale, those types of things, and tons of other stuff. The huge lie that you should care how many homes that agent sold last year or how much money they made last year, right? When they tell you that they're a top 1% agent, that top 1% is based on nothing that should matter to a buyer or a seller, right? I've done that show a couple of times over the last year. It's one I like to do more frequently just to keep it in the front of everyone's mind, so that we can remind ourselves what you actually care about as a buyer or a seller, right? Anyway, I could do that show again right now because it gets me so pissed off when I think about it. But anyway, it's absolutely the thing that I built my soapbox on when I first started this show. But it's casual in everything. It's the postcard where an agent will tell you they have buyers for your neighborhood. And while that one is probably the least of the lies, because they may actually have active buyers who have searches running for a home that meets your description, they don't have anyone for your specific property. Now, the mea culpa for me is early in my career, I was that agent. I would love to say I've always been the beacon of honesty and adhering to kind of a higher standard of truth. But I wasn't. The thing that saved me was my grandfather was. He'd been a real estate broker since after World War II. He got out of the Navy after World War II, became a real estate broker, and mostly helped people with investments, with acquiring property and developing them. And he actually represented folks like he represented Sonny and Cher. He represented the guy who used to play Flash Gordon in the old serials. He's got actually a pretty long, he helped Bob Hope's estate acquire property. I don't think he ever actually met Bob Hope, but he helped them acquire some property. But in any event, so I used to get great stories when I was a kid from my grandfather. And I'd hear him talk to people, and he was always just ridiculously straightforward and honest. And I thought that's the way this business worked, because he was the only person I'd ever seen really do it. So lo and behold, we hit to the late 80s, and I decided to get my license. And I'm the youngest guy in the office, and the second or third youngest guy is the top producer in this particular Century 21 office. And he takes me under his wing. And he was a smooth talking, slick agent. And I went through all the trainings. There were some mandatory trainings I had to go to, none of them designed to make me a better agent, all designed to make me a better earner. And the two things sometimes may share brain space, but they don't. When you're training an agent to be a better producer, it doesn't mean you're training them to be better at closing an escrow, or better at identifying things that are a biggest threat to your clients, or really making or really educating them on what it means to have a fiduciary relationship. Being an earner means you get as many clients as you possibly can, and you get them to a closed transaction, regardless of whether or not that closed transaction is in their best interest. No one out in the world is going to admit that's how things work, but that is exactly how they work. And I guess some of them can say, well, you know, Robert, your information is just too old. Real estate doesn't work that way anymore. Well, I'll tell you what, sport, given the number of interactions I have with agents, which thank God is relatively low these days. Since I'm a broker, I don't have to hang out with agents. There is no water cooler for me to pass the day with. I am a broker. I don't have to work under another broker's license. So one of the main reasons I got my broker's license was so that the only agents I ever had to deal with were the enemy. I could smile and shake hands with the best of them when it comes to meeting them and talking to them at an open house or whatever. But the bottom line is they're the enemy, because if they're listing a house, then I'm going to represent the buyer, and it's my job to get the very lowest price possible. So if you're ever any of these approaches where they say, I've got a ready, willing, and able buyer, or now, in my example, for folks who didn't catch yesterday's show and this topic interests you, go ahead and listen to the first 15, 20 minutes of yesterday's show, and you'll get the nitty gritty of what happened with me in terms of having my property on the Make Me Move category. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, if you go to Zillow, you can enter an amount of money that you would take for your house, which is if someone offered me this number, I would sell my house number. Right? And what I did is I figured out what I could reasonably sell my home for right now if I put it on the MLS, and I put it out there. And for convenience reasons, I would consider doing it that way because it would also make me more money in terms of not having to pay fees for commissions and other things if a buyer were to directly find me that way. And it would also mean that I wouldn't make the extra money I'm calculating I will make after I make improvements to my property. So I'm not totally jazzed about the idea of someone jumping on board with the buy it at that price number that I have in Zillow, because I'm tempted by the amount of money I'm projecting I'm going to make after I make the improvements to the master bathroom and the kitchen. It's going to be great, and it's going to earn me a whole lot more money, and it's going to earn me a lot more than I've spent on getting those things done. All right. So and you can do that with your own home, whatever home you've got. I've done the same thing with my property in Hawaii. I added like $75,000 to what I think is probably what it would sell for right now as a Make Me Move price for that. And we'll see what happens. Every once in a while, that market goes nuts, and people will start throwing money at things, and I'd be happy for someone to throw money at me. But the point is, if anyone, and this, here's the thing, this isn't even a marginal thing. Every single agent who contacted me or everyone who ended up being an agent contacted me based on a lie. The lie either being I have a buyer or I'm an investor and I would like to buy your property. 100% of the agents who approached me saying I am an investor, I don't have an investor, I'm an investor, 100% of them ended up wanting to list the home. Now, these ended up in one of two ways when this happened. Now, the first few who contacted me, it was almost like a fun experiment. I made a point of not including my signature in my emails that say, hey, I'm a real estate broker and here's my broker's license number. I made a point of keeping it all generic. And sure enough, I would end up getting to, I had one, I stopped doing that after the second one, but the second one, the first and second were almost identical. And it was like, I can get you this price by listing it for you. And I felt okay. And for those of you who might say, well, that was kind of a jerk move on your part, wasn't it, Robert? No, it wasn't, because in the description of the home, I had the information that I'm a broker. And if you're an agent trying to get a listing, don't contact me. So I'm sorry. That's just one of life's little intelligence tests that these folks failed right out of the gate. But in any event, these first couple, I wasn't ready for. I figured maybe 1 in 5 would be a pinhead. Nope, it was 100% of them. Not a single one of them contacted me stating their honest intent of why they were coming over. So the first, and I let the first two actually go ahead and come over. I don't have a lot of time. You folks know lately I've been talking about how I barely even have time to often do the show. So the first one really pissed me off because I changed plans to meet with this person. And that she shows up and it's like, wow, I see. And right now the house is in shambles because we're packing and we're demolishing some things and doing these other things. And her thing was that she had a ready buyer who she claimed had driven by and had knew the area and had looked at everything online and swore that she had absolutely digested everything about my property on Zillow. And she said, but in order for me to move forward, I need to get a listing on your property so that I can show it to people. So that was when I said, okay. And the conversation I mentioned yesterday happened where I said, oh, so you've looked at everything. Oh yeah. No, I read up on your property. It looks very promising. And from what I'm seeing here, we could absolutely get this buyer in here and have them work through an offer. And I said, well, okay, so then I'm a real estate broker, right? Deer in the headlights. Was the immediate, well, no, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, so you didn't read the listing in Zillow. So here's the thing, and let's put a stake in the ground on this right now. This agent would be categorized as a top producing agent in terms of the number of escrows that she closes. And she's also a moron. The interaction with her convinced me that this person was an idiot. Not all of them struck me as absolute idiots, but and maybe I have a default. You tell me enough lies, I assume you're an idiot. Particularly ones that are so blatant as the ones that I was being told. So that conversation wrapped up, and I said, hey, if you've got a buyer, as she's leaving, I say, if you've got a buyer, honestly, I'm perfectly happy to work out a deal, but I'm not signing any listing agreement until you have you can have the listing agreement in one hand and the offer in the other. Or I'll just tell me you have an offer to submit and I will list it with myself. But you'll have to figure out how you're going to get paid. Maybe we can come to some sort of an agreement, but we'll have to talk about that. Never heard. And here's the other thing. Left the door open with every single one of these folks I talked to come up with a creative way to satisfy this buyer that they had. Never heard back. Nothing ever went anywhere. And what's really interesting is, as I said, I only took the first two to the full on, they show up and we talk moment, just because frankly, I had no more time for it. But the other interesting thing to note, and I think I've actually had another contact since yesterday's show. I had one more contact me earlier today. But in any event, as soon as they realize I'm a broker, conversation ends. I had one contact me yesterday who said, yeah, the same story. I'm an investor. I buy properties. We analyze them and then figure out, how much we can make on them. I can guarantee a close in 10 days for all cash, full on, right? So I do the back and forth email with them. And because of the way I had it set up with that particular alert, they weren't seeing my signature that says I'm a real estate broker. And he offers a time to come look at the house, 9:30 a.m. the next day. I let him know I'm not available at 9:30 a.m. I let him know another time I'm available. He comes, that doesn't quite work for me. Do you have another time and date that works? That next email I send out, I include 3 or 4 different dates and times, and I give him the signature at the end. Radio silence. And remember, this is a conversation that was happening instantaneously, right? So the email would go within 2 minutes. I was getting a response back and forth each time. He was getting a response from me instantly. I was getting a response as soon as that signature went out that showed I was a real estate broker. End of conversation. So what annoys me about that is in terms of creating what do you learn? What do you take away from it? Because remember, one of my goals when I'm sharing these stories, particularly the anecdotal ones, is what should you walk away with? What should you have in your pocket from the information? I don't want to just tell you a story that's like, and then you tell it at cocktail parties, and that's all you get out of it. I want it to be something where you can extract a bigger truth out of it that can help you make good decisions down the road. Now, let's talk about that right after this break, so don't go away. We'll be back in just a sec.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. So how do we make some value out of this, right? I guess the number one thing is make no commitments based on something a real estate agent tells you. So if you're told, I have a buyer, fantastic. As soon as you've got an offer in your hands, why don't you come on over and at the same time we look at that offer, I'll go ahead and sign a listing agreement. If someone tells you they're looking to invest, make sure they understand, or if it's a similar situation to mine where they're saying, I'm not interested in I'm interested in simply buying your property. Say great. So make sure not to bring a listing agreement. Because that's what's going to happen. And what shocks me is this isn't even, now granted, my sample size is pretty small. We're talking 10 agents so far, 2 that ended up coming over. So I guess 100%, so 12 out of 12 ended up being liars. Whether it was, we are going to buy it because we're going to treat it as an investment, or whether it was, I have buyers kind of a thing. None of that ended up being true. Not a single one. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that all those 10 times that suddenly communication ended when they discovered I was a broker are also lies, right? Because what would stop you from still wanting to buy an investment or carrying through on the thing you stated was your reason for being here? And it's hard to blame them in a lot of ways because of the casual level of white lies that's done. If you were to go out and read books, How to Be $1 Million Agent or these other types of things, you're going to come across a lot of little examples of the casual lie. And what I find most interesting about this subject is how little it's talked about intelligently. You get you'll find different, particularly folks who are really hot on the for sale by owner thing. Will tell you all the various lies that they say agents will tell. And I guess some of those hold water. We can talk about those if you really wanted to and deal with them on a one-to-one basis. But it's really more of a marketing thing. And it's done in a way that is plausible, I guess. It gives them a little plausible deniability. But I suppose some of the biggest lies are the ones of omission. And this particularly affects sellers. Agents want to appeal to your emotional side. And when you have an emotional feeling of what your home is worth, and this is why I always tell folks who contact me for advice on how they should move forward, absolutely make anything your real estate agent tells you, make them prove it. And make them prove the things you desperately want to believe in. For instance, I have folks I'm talking with right now who want to sell their home in Gilroy. And unfortunately, it's a beautiful home, but it's in a part of Gilroy that's not least desirable because there's a crime problem, but least desirable because if you break up Gilroy into different chunks, it's the furthest southern end of Gilroy. And from a commuting standpoint, it's just the least desirable, right? So not because of the problems with the homes, it's simply the folks who are going to pay the amount of money you want for your home are folks who are going to want to be as far north as possible so their commute's better, because most of the folks making those levels of income are working in Silicon Valley, and there's this sort of unspoken thing in buyers' heads that they don't want to go further south than First Street, for instance. Now, what agents will casually do is simply say, yeah, no, I can absolutely get you that amount of money. I can get you what you're saying you're going to list for. Make them prove it. Make them show you comparables and look at where those comparables are and get a feeling for whether or not you're being lied to, because the odds are you're going to be hurt by that relationship. There is no upside to listing your home and having it sit on the market for months and months and months, you having to keep it in sale ready, showing shape, only to find it languishes on the market. And I think that's one of the most impactful lies. I mean, the lies I was told to cost me, by and large, a minute or two in terms of having email exchange, aside for those first two that I actually made huge changes to my schedule to accommodate them actually coming over to discover they're lying. And there's nothing more fun than discovering face-to-face that a realtor's lying to you, because I'm not gentle when I come to that conclusion. But in any event, by and large, that's a painless thing. It didn't cost me any money at the end of the day. It didn't affect my expectations in any way. I can move forward and everything's fine. Imagine the poor seller who's had their expectations set and honestly believes they're about to sell their house. They're planning. They're looking for movers. They're maybe boxing stuff up. And they've hooked their wagon to a person who is a dirty, rotten little liar who didn't deliver. So how do you deal with that? Well, make it cost them something. Now, one thing I do in my business is I offer guarantees. If I don't get you a price within a reasonable range that's typical for your market, if I don't get you sold in a certain amount of time, it costs me money. In other words, if I don't get you an amount I say I'm going to get you within a range, I refund a certain amount of money back to you. That sounds right? What are the two things you care about as a seller? I care about how much my house sells for, and I care about how quickly it sells. And the promise that a real estate agent is making you is that my skill set makes it so that I will help you get more than the typical person in this marketplace. Well, okay. Well, then let's calculate what more than the typical is, which is easy to do. And if you don't do that, let's say it costs you money. Now, 99% of agents will go eyes wide and soil themselves, because what you've introduced into the equation is an actual metric to judge the quality of their work. And that's what's missing in the world of real estate. Metrics with which to measure the quality of their work. Now, almost no agent is going to agree to what I'm suggesting that you do. in terms of asking them for it. Some may. I have encountered a few agents over the course of my career that are okay. Most of them aren't. And this is something that you're going to need to be aware of. So just don't let any of these lies force you into a commitment. Make them come up with their commitment. They started with this commitment crap. Let's make them live up to their commitment first. Okay. Yeah, and there could be more to come. I mean, there's so many different topics that we could talk about that I really started the show on in terms of things to complain about in this business. But I think that's a pretty good one to start with, particularly if you're dealing with someone who hasn't really proven to you that they deserve your trust yet. And I hate saying this stuff because you know what? As an insider, I can say, you know what? The fact that most people hate real estate agents' guts is founded in reality. It's not a made up thing. And it really is going to it really needs to, the way business needs to get done needs to change. Let me give you one example. So in prep for this show, I actually went out and did a search on lies real estate agents tell, that kind of stuff. And I found one that I thought was interesting. It was what was the title? The top lies that real estate agents say. And it was from a website called The Balance. Get a copy of the agent's production record. Okay. But the data they say you should look at is how many homes the agent sold in a year and how much they sold for. Well, no, you don't care, right? As a seller, you want to get the most you can get and you want to do it as quickly as possible. So that the data you want may be production information relating to the escrows that they've closed, but you want to know is if in a certain market, homes are tending to sell for 1% over asking price, you want to find out, well, you listed a home at price X. In that same marketplace, did you sell it? What did you sell it for in comparison to the asking price? If you sold it for 3% over asking price, well, then you're beating the average for that market, and that person is someone you might want to talk to. But if you're selling it 3% under asking price in a marketplace where people are tending to get over asking price, that tells you two things about that agent. One, or possible things. One, they suck at telling you what to list your house at, or they suck at working to negotiate the right price for your home when it all comes right down to it. So they stink in one of two critical things, picking the price or getting the price, right? And then the other thing is, what's the average days on market for your properties that you've sold over the last year? And what were the average days on market in those markets where you sold? If the average days on market was 27 days and it took you 45 days to get a home sold, and when you average all of it out over the course of that year, you're 15 days over the average in all the various markets, who the hell wants to list with that guy, right? So focus on what actually matters to you. Do not, because even in this case where we have someone who's trying to call out the lies of real estate agents, we're getting these stupid responses that have been dictated by the real estate industry. The things you should care about are, because that's all agents sell you. They sell you as a top % agent because I made X amount of dollars last year. I sold X number of homes last year, where in reality, and the one that really gets me is the X number of homes one, because by and large, those top producers didn't do it. They were the folks who went to the front end of the deal and got someone to sign that listing agreement, but then they handed it off to a team after that. And so they didn't do anything relating to actually getting that transaction done. And they probably didn't learn any lessons from it because they weren't the hands-on people doing it. A few months ago, we talked about a list of praise that had come out for a bunch of different agents that were going to be invited to talk at a thing that agents go to. And one of the folks they were going to talk to was someone who closed 350-something escrows in a year. Do you realize that's almost an escrow a day? Do you honestly believe that that agent was personally involved in each one of those transactions and taking care of those? Do you believe that a whole lot of attention was spent defending prices or making sure everything was done correctly? No, it's cookie cutter real estate. It is manufacturing line real estate. And what's awesome is it's also the kind of real estate that will be replaced by automated systems down the road. Because there's no value add. The individual, the human being in that process is not providing any value add. Can you think of any value add that could possibly be heaped on by an agent who is theoretically selling nearly a house a day? No, not happening. Anyway, okay. So let's get into some other little news tidbits. We're running a little bit long today. I apologize. I went on a little bit longer about that stuff that I'd planned. First, mortgage rates hit 2-week lows. This is news that came out on the 21st of this month. Mortgage rates were steady to slightly lower today, keeping them in line with the lowest levels in 2 weeks and very close to the lowest levels for the month. For most lenders, that means conventional 30-year fixed rate quotes of 4.25 on top tier scenarios. So once again, what we push here on this show has pretty much been proven to be true. You get that initial uptick when you see the Fed raise rates, and then after a couple of weeks, things tend to calm down. So, yay. I think that I keep reminding you of this because if you want to try to anticipate interest rates, pay more attention to the 10-year treasuries. Pay less attention to what the Fed does. Next, Architectural Billing Index increased in February. This is great news. Remember, I like to try to give you data that anticipates, that's a precursor to increases in things that are important. In this case, when we start to see more architects being employed, that means more homes are likely to be getting built. And we saw that number was up. It was up from the previous month. And let's see, the score reflects a minor increase in design services. The new projects inquiry index was 61.5, up from a reading of 60 the previous month, while the new design contracts index climbed from 52.1 to 54.7. Let's see. And it looked like we had pretty good upticks in all of the various regions. The building index, though, when looked at historically, is actually a little bit on the low side, not as low as when things really hit the fan, but we've seen a sort of steady increase, but it's flattening out right now. But in any event, I'm happy with this news. The idea that we're seeing more architects working is a good thing. And then finally, and this echoes again what we've talked about over and over on this show. There's one way to slow down the Fed, according to the folks at CNBC. That's build more homes. 2 swift rate hikes in a span of 4 months. I don't know why they're referring to them as they are literally the smallest rate hike you could get if you are going to raise a rate. There is a way to slow the pace of interest rate increases, build more homes. A deep dive into the latest inflation figures shows that housing components are rising much faster than most other components. Specifically, rent rose 3.9, while the homeowner's equivalent of rent increased by 3.5. The latter requires assumptions and is a bit fuzzy, but essentially it tries to measure what homeowners would pay in rent to live in the home they own. Still, market forces and home price movements would imply that the owner equivalent of rent should be something resembling what renters are paying. So, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of this. By and large, it's a relatively stupid article, to be perfectly honest with you. But what it's pointing out is we are starting to finally see, and this hasn't been happening, some mainstream news outlets talking about building homes as the solution to our problem. They don't come out and say anywhere in here that we should not be trying to enable more buying. Which is a shame. I would love somebody out there to come out and say, so here's the deal. What solves our problem? Doing what we're doing, which is increasing the number of buyers out there and specifically reaching out to the most challenged buyers or subprime buyers? Or does it make more sense to leave our lending standards where they are and to reach out to builders to enable them to build more homes? I would love somebody with a great big media machine behind them to start having that conversation. And of course, God, is this from Lawrence Yun? It is. Sadly, it's a commentary piece from Lawrence Yun, who is my least favorite guy at the National Association of Realtors. He's their chief economist, and all too frequently tends to say things that are more about propping up real estate than anything else, because that's where his bread's buttered, right? He works for the National Association of Real Estate. So yeah. He would not want to do that comparison. He would simply want to say build more homes because they want to boost activity. We've got plenty of buyers. What we need are more homes. So anyway, that makes sense too. But anyway, at least we're seeing someone mentioning it. It saddens me that it's Lawrence Yun, but I'd love to see more big media outlets talking about it. All right, folks. I try to give you what you want. I had so many people interested in the talking about the bad stuff real estate agents do. I hope the first chunk of the show satisfied that need. as always, the goal here is for you to walk away with more value in things to think about and to consider than the time that you spent listening to the show. Hope I delivered today. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.